Parents favored my sister and treated me like their servant. Now they're watching as another man proudly calls me his son. I'm a 27-year-old man, and I grew up in a household where I was never really wanted. My parents made that clear from the moment I could understand words. They weren't outright cruel in the way you see in movies. There were no harsh insults or physical punishments, but there were small, calculated ways they let me know I wasn't important. I was a burden, an afterthought. My younger sister, on the other hand, was treated like royalty. From the time she was born, it was obvious I was just an accessory in her life. If she wanted a toy, she got it. If I wanted something, I was being ungrateful. If she cried, my parents dropped everything to comfort her. If I cried, I was being dramatic. She was never expected to lift a finger while I was constantly told to help out because I was the older sibling. That meant cooking, cleaning, and making sure she was taken care of, something that became my full responsibility once I hit my teenage years. It didn't stop at home. My parents had this way of making sure I never had too much freedom. Every opportunity I got, they found a way to take it from me. If I wanted to join a club at school, suddenly I had too many responsibilities at home to make time for it. If I wanted to go out with friends, they would say they didn't feel well and needed me to stay home. And scholarships, the ones I worked so hard for, they refused to sign the necessary paperwork claiming I was being selfish for wanting to leave. The manipulation was constant. If I ever pushed back, my parents would turn on the waterworks. They'd tell family members how difficult I was, how much they had sacrificed for me, how I never appreciated them. Then I'd get calls from aunts and uncles telling me to be nicer to my poor parents. By the time I turned 18, I was done. I left home for college the second I could, even though it meant struggling financially. My parents refused to support me, so I worked multiple jobs just to get by. It was exhausting, but it was still better than living under their thumb. That's when I met David. David was my best friend's dad, and he was everything my parents weren't. Warm, supportive, encouraging. It started small, inviting me over for dinner when he knew I was skipping meals to save money. Giving me little bits of advice when I felt lost. But over time, he became the father I never had. He celebrated my wins, helped me through my losses, and never once made me feel like a burden. And my actual parents? They hated it. At first, they brushed it off, acting like it was ridiculous that I was spending time with some random man. But as the years went by and David's role in my life became more obvious, my parents got more aggressive. They started making snide comments whenever I mentioned David. If I posted about him on social media, they would leave passive-aggressive comments or text me things like, "Glad to see you found a real father. Don't forget who raised you." They never invited me home for the holidays, but if I spent them with David's family, they acted like it was a betrayal. But I was thriving without them. I worked hard, graduated, and landed a stable job. My life was finally mine, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me back into that toxic cycle. David, meanwhile, never once pushed me to choose between him and my parents. Over time, David had started referring to me as his son more and more. It wasn't a single moment, but a gradual shift, first in private, then with friends, and finally at a family gathering where he casually introduced me as, "Oh, this is my son." He didn't hesitate. He didn't add a disclaimer. And for the first time, I felt like it was true. Not like a son, just son. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The moment my parents found out, let's just say, they didn't take it well. It didn't take long for them to find out. A few days after David introduced me as his son at the family gathering, my phone lit up with a call from my parents. I stared at the screen for a second. They almost never called. Most of our interactions were through passive-aggressive texts, or if they needed something, an email with a subject line like urgent that always turned out to be anything but. I let it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, another call. Then another. On the fourth attempt, I answered. They started off with a long pause followed by a deep, shaky breath. Their signature move whenever they were gearing up for a guilt trip. They wanted to know if it was true. If I had really let some man replace them. They sounded heartbroken. Like they had just found out I'd been leading a double life as a criminal. They kept saying how hurt they were. How they never thought I'd be so cruel. Then came the demand. I needed to apologize. Immediately. Calling another man dad was a betrayal. They said, unforgivable. Disgusting. What kind of son does that? What would people think? They kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I knew this game. They'd pushed just hard enough until I broke and agreed to whatever made them feel better. But this time, I didn't play along. I told them there was nothing to apologize for. David had been more of a father to me than they ever were. Silence. Then, a sharp inhale, offended, dramatic. They hung up. I didn't think much of it at first. I should have known better. A few hours later, I got a notification that they had liked an old photo of mine from 2 years ago. Then another, then a random comment under a post about my work promotion. Not a congratulatory comment, of course. Just a vague, "Oh, interesting." The next morning, more notifications. They were going through my social media, liking random things, making sure I knew they were watching. Then came the texts. They hoped I was doing okay. They were worried about me. They hoped I wasn't being influenced by the wrong people. They just wanted to make sure I wasn't being manipulated. I ignored it. By noon, my sister had texted. She was 24 now, still the golden child, still comfortably nestled under our parents' control. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't check in. She just wanted to know why I was being so cruel to our parents. She threw in the classic lines. They did everything for us. They sacrificed so much. They're devastated. Then came the part I was waiting for. They're your parents. You only get one set. I didn't respond. Later that night, I finally called them back. I asked them, point blank, why they never defended me. Why they let me be treated like I didn't matter. They sighed. Another classic move. Then they said, we didn't want to make things worse. That was it. That was the reason. Not that they didn't see it. Not that they disagreed. Just that standing up for me wasn't worth the trouble. I hung up. That night, I blocked my parents on Instagram. By morning, they had switched tactics. Family members started reaching out. Some were subtle. You know, they just miss you so much. Others went straight for the guilt trip. I don't know if I could ever do that to my own parents. It didn't matter how I explained it. They didn't want to hear about the years of neglect, the manipulation, the way they only cared about control. To them, they were just heartbroken parents abandoned by their ungrateful son. David, of course, saw right through it. He told me something that stuck with me. That love isn't about ownership. That just because someone raised you doesn't mean they have the right to mistreat you. That real family is the people who show up for you, not the ones who expect loyalty just because of blood. That was when I knew. I wasn't going to let them guilt me back into their life. The next text from my parents was an ultimatum. If we're not your parents, don't ever ask us for anything again. I stared at it for a second. Then I responded, you've never given me anything to ask for. Blocked. At first, there was silence. No texts. No calls. No flying monkeys. For the first time in years, I felt free. But I knew better. My parents weren't the type to let things go. And I was right. At first, the silence was suspicious. My parents weren't the type to let things go, and I knew blocking them wasn't the end of it. I just didn't expect them to escalate this fast. It started with a warning from a cousin. A short, vague text. Hey. I don't know if you've seen, but your parents have been saying some stuff, might want to check Facebook. I didn't need to check. I already knew the playbook. But curiosity got the best of me. Sure enough, their page was filled with vague dramatic posts. The kind of stuff designed to get sympathy without directly admitting what happened. Things like it breaks our hearts when parents give their whole life for a child only to be abandoned for strangers. Some people forget who was there for them when it mattered. Followed by floods of supportive comments from distant relatives and old family friends. You're such good parents. You don't deserve this. He'll realize one day how much he's hurt you. I rolled my eyes and closed the app, but it didn't stop there. I started getting messages from family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were concerned. Others were more direct, telling me how selfish I was, how ungrateful I had become. One aunt even asked if I was being brainwashed by David. Then my sister got involved. Unlike me, she never had to question where she stood in the family. She got the praise, the support, the unconditional love. So, of course, she backed them completely. Out of nowhere, I got a text from her. No greeting. No small talk. Just one sentence. You're a disappointment. Blocked. A few hours later, I noticed I was no longer following her on social media. I checked her page. Yep. She had blocked me too. At this point, I thought they had reached their limit. I was wrong. A week later, I was at work when the receptionist called me up front. She looked uncomfortable. That was my first red flag. The messages had been relentless. First, vague guilt tripping, then accusations, then outright threats. I knew they weren't going to stop, but I didn't expect them to escalate so quickly. When the receptionist called me up front a week later, I had a sinking feeling. And there they were standing in the lobby, looking around as if they had every right to be there. Their faces set in tight, forced smiles. The moment they spotted me, they started talking loudly. They needed to talk to me. This wasn't how families acted. They deserved a conversation. After everything they had done for me, I couldn't even give them 5 minutes. People were staring. The receptionist was shifting awkwardly, unsure if she should intervene. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just told them to leave. That's when the tears started. They started listing off every sacrifice they had ever made for me. How they worked so hard to give me a good life. How they always loved me. How they didn't understand where they went wrong. The security guard had seen enough. Within minutes, they were being escorted out, still calling my name, still playing the victim. I went back to my desk like nothing happened. 2 days later, the letters started. Long dramatic letters mailed to my apartment, pages filled with memories of my childhood, underlined sentences about how much they loved me, guilt trips about how they had given me life and I was throwing them away. I didn't read them. Straight to the trash. David didn't even seem surprised when I told him. He just shook his head and said, real love isn't conditional. Then came the next big event, my sister's wedding. I hadn't spoken to her in months, and I had zero plans to go. But apparently, that wasn't an option. I got a text from my parents listing out the date and time, followed by "We expect you to be there. You're still part of this family." No question. No invite. Just an expectation. I ignored it. 2 days later, another text: "We can't believe how selfish you are. This is your sister's wedding. You really won't put your issues aside for one day." Ignored. Then a final message from my sister: "If you're not willing to apologize to our parents, you're not welcome at my wedding." That one, I answered. Good. I wasn't planning on going. Blocked. Apparently, that was the last straw. My parents lost it. I found out later from a cousin that they had gone off at a family gathering. Full meltdown. Screaming about how David had stolen me. How I was brainwashed. How I was throwing away my family. People were starting to see it now. Some relatives still took their side. But others, they were starting to back away. They weren't defending them anymore. They weren't agreeing with them. If I thought my parents were done after the wedding fiasco, I was wrong. Blocking them, refusing to engage, it only made them more desperate. And when they got desperate, they got messy. The first thing they did was take their smear campaign public. Their Facebook turned into a battlefield. At first, it was vague, cryptic posts about selfish children, but then they got bolder, directly calling me out, twisting the truth to make themselves the victims. Some people bought into it. Others started pushing back, asking why their perfect son had cut contact. The cracks in their narrative started to show. They wrote long rambling posts about how they sacrificed everything. How I had cut off my real family for strangers, and how it was also heartbreaking to watch their own child be brainwashed. Some relatives still ate it up, commenting things like, "You're such strong parents. He'll realize one day how much he hurt you." Others just stopped engaging, but that wasn't enough for them. They needed to do more damage. First it was the Facebook posts. Then family members started reaching out, urging me to reconsider. The messages grew more desperate, more aggressive. And then a week later, an email landed in my job's HR inbox. Someone, an anonymous concerned relative, had claimed I was unstable and mentally unfit for my position. It didn't take a detective to figure out who was behind it. HR wouldn't tell me the name, but they did say the email was filled with vague concerns about my behavior and how they thought I was being led down a dangerous path. It was laughable. HR called me in for a meeting. Their expressions careful but professional. They had received an anonymous complaint about my mental instability. I expected panic, but instead, my manager just sighed. "We've seen these kinds of things before," they said. Someone trying to stir up trouble after a brief review. They dismissed the complaint as baseless. But the fact that they even tried to sabotage my job, that was a new low. David, of course, wasn't about to stay silent. He made a single Facebook post, not mentioning my parents, not even referring to the situation directly, but the message was clear. Real love is unconditional. Real love doesn't demand obedience. Real love doesn't manipulate. The comments were flooded with support. People knew. Even the ones who had been neutral before started backing away from my parents. That's when my parents tried to take things offline. David's family was hosting a big gathering, a casual event with food, music, and a bunch of close friends. I was invited, obviously. And somehow my parents found out. I was in the middle of a conversation when I saw them standing outside the venue looking around like they were searching for someone. I turned to David, who was already reaching for his phone. Within minutes, security was escorting them off the property. They caused a scene, of course, loud protests about how they were just trying to see their son. How cruel it was that they were being kept away, but no one was buying it. That was the moment some of my relatives finally got it. The ones who had still been defending them, still thinking this was just a misunderstanding. They finally saw how unhinged they had become. After that, things started unraveling fast. David, being David, never asked for anything in return for all the love and support he gave me. But that week, he gave me something I'll never forget, a small bracelet, simple, with one word engraved on it, son. It wasn't a legal adoption, obviously, but the message was clear. And when my parents found out, they lost it. Another Facebook rant. This time, it wasn't vague. It was an all-out meltdown. Caps lock, excessive punctuation, talking about how some man had stolen me, how I was throwing away my real family, how they were done being parents to an ungrateful, disloyal child. That post, that was the final straw. Relatives who had been on the fence before, gone. People who had been offering them sympathy, silent. No one wanted to be associated with that level of unhinged. Meanwhile, my sister's wedding finally happened, and it was a disaster. Without me there, all the attention was on them. They weren't playing the victims in the background anymore. They were the problem. They made a huge scene, got into arguments with guests, and spent the whole night making passive-aggressive comments about how some people abandon their family. And then, apparently, that was the other parent's breaking point. Over the months, I had started hearing things. They weren't just silently enduring my parents' meltdowns anymore. They were arguing back. A cousin mentioned that they had stormed out of a family gathering after one of their public breakdowns. Then came the message from them. Short but heavy with meaning. We should have left years ago. It wasn't just regret. It was resignation. That's when the rumors started. People were saying the other parents were finally done. That they were looking into divorce. That they had been putting up with their antics for years. But now, without me as a buffer, they saw my parents for what they really were. And my parents, their entire reputation was in shambles. Even the people who once defended them had backed off. They had gone too far, tried too hard to control me. And in doing so, lost control over everything else. And me, I was doing better than ever. I had a great job, amazing friends, and a real father figure in David. I didn't just escape. I thrived. And the best part, they had to watch it all from the sidelines. After the wedding disaster, things got quiet. Too quiet. For a while, it seemed like my parents had finally given up. No more dramatic Facebook posts. No random flying monkey relatives showing up in my inbox. Even my sister had gone silent. Then the calls started. Unknown numbers. No voicemails. Just ringing over and over. At first, I ignored them. Then they got more frequent. Middle of the day, late at night, even during work hours. I picked up once, and there was nothing but silence on the other end before the call disconnected. I blocked the numbers, but new ones kept popping up. Then I got the email. It was from my parents. A long, overly sweet message about how they wanted to put the past behind us. How family should always stick together. How they forgave me for the way I treated them. Forgave me. I deleted it. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a cousin sending me a screenshot. My parents had posted on Facebook. Again. Only this time, it wasn't the usual vague sob story. This one was specific. They were telling everyone how they had graciously forgiven me for hurting them. How they were so happy that we had finally reconciled, and how parents' love is eternal no matter what. It was all a lie. I hadn't spoken to them. I hadn't agreed to anything. And now they were out there telling everyone that we had made up. I wasn't letting that slide. I made my own post. Short to the point. There has been no reconciliation. I have no interest in having a relationship with my parents. Please don't believe everything you read online. That was all it took. Comments flooded in. Some people were confused. Some asked if I was sure. But others, they got it. And then my parents saw it. Cue the meltdown. More posts. More victim playing. This time, they went all in. Talking about how they tried to make peace, but their selfish, cold-hearted son had publicly humiliated them instead. How they had done everything for me and I had cruelly thrown it back in their face. Some relatives fell for it. Others didn't. At this point, most people were exhausted by the drama. Then they did something I did not see coming. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was another dramatic note from them, but no. This one had an official letterhead. They were suing me for emotional distress. I actually laughed when I saw it. They had no case. No real damages. Just pages of nonsense about how I had intentionally caused them suffering by cutting them off and turning people against them. David, being the absolute legend that he is, took one look at the letter and told me not to worry. He knew a lawyer. We set up a meeting. The lawyer didn't even try to be professional about it. He laughed as he skimmed through the papers. Called it a joke. Said it wouldn't hold up in any court. That should have been the end of it. But my parents, they doubled down. Instead of letting it go, they went nuclear. Another public meltdown, ranting about how they were being forced to take legal action against their own child because they had no other choice. How they had been pushed to the edge by my heartless betrayal. They wanted people to take their side. Instead, they lost the last few supporters they had left. And then came the final bombshell. The family was splitting apart. My uncle and aunt, who had been my parents' strongest supporters and financial backers, finally saw through the manipulation. They announced they were cutting all ties and financial support. For years, they had enabled my parents, always choosing to believe their side, but something had changed. They stopped defending my parents. Started walking away from arguments instead of making excuses for them. Relatives mentioned that the whole extended family seemed tired of the drama, more distant. And when the family separation was finally announced, it wasn't just a sudden decision, it was a long overdue escape from the toxic dynamics my parents had created. Without the extended family's financial support, my parents were screwed. My sister, the golden child, had always been on their side. But now, with the family splitting apart and the money drying up, she was seeing things differently. Maybe it was because the financial security was gone. Maybe it was because our uncle and aunt had finally started telling her things they'd kept quiet about for years. Either way, she turned on our parents too. Now they were completely alone. The last message I ever got from them came a few days later. You did this. You ruined our lives. I hope you're happy. Blocked. For good this time. They had spent years trying to control me, manipulate me, punish me for existing outside of their grasp. And in the end, they destroyed themselves. It's been a year since I blocked my parents for good. A lot has changed since then. For the first time in my life, I feel free. No random calls from flying monkey relatives. No social media smear campaigns. No guilt weighing on me every time I make a decision that benefits me instead of them. And the best part, my life is better than ever. Work has been going great. I got a promotion a few months ago, and my financial situation is the most stable it's ever been. I've been traveling more, meeting new people, and actually enjoying my life without feeling like I have to look over my shoulder. David, of course, has been there through all of it. He's not just my best friend's dad anymore. He's my dad. He introduces me that way to everyone, and I don't correct him. I stopped thinking of it as an honorary title a long time ago. He's the one who supports me. He's the one who celebrates my wins, gives me advice, and makes sure I have a place to go on the holidays. Speaking of holidays, last Christmas was the first time I felt truly at home. David's family welcomed me like I had always been there. I sat at a full dinner table surrounded by warmth, laughter, and people who genuinely cared about me. And for the first time, I wasn't just an outsider trying to fit in. I belonged. Meanwhile, my parents' lives were in ruins. After the separation, they were cut off completely. They lost the house, the financial safety net, and the reputation they spent years building. They had to move into a much smaller place. A far cry from the image they always tried to maintain. Their social standing is gone too. The relatives who used to defend them, they've distanced themselves. No one wants to be associated with them after seeing how far they were willing to go to manipulate and control me. And as for my sister, the golden child, she finally saw the truth. At first, she stayed on their side after the separation. But without the financial support, the cracks started showing. She saw how manipulative they could be. How exhausting it was to constantly manage their emotions. How it was never enough, no matter how much she tried to please them. At first, my sister defended them fiercely, dismissing everything I said as overreaction, but after the separation, cracks started to form. Without the financial support, she saw firsthand how draining they were. She admitted they were exhausting to deal with, how nothing she did was enough. Then one day, she sent a short message, I see it now, that she saw what I had been dealing with for years. I accepted her apology, but I wasn't in a rush to rebuild anything. She may have been a victim of their manipulation too, but that doesn't erase the things she did or said to me. For now, I'm keeping my distance. And my parents, they've become ghosts. They used to be the respected heads of our extended family. The ones who held the family together. The ones who were always right no matter what. Now, they're an embarrassment. At a recent family gathering, a cousin of mine casually mentioned that someone had leaked old screenshots of my parents' past manipulative messages. The fake concern, the guilt trips, the blatant emotional blackmail, it was all out in the open. They have no defenders left. No one to spin their lies. Then 2 weeks ago, they made their final move, an email. Their final email was a mix of apology and manipulation, a desperate attempt to regain control. They listed out all the times they had loved me, conveniently skipping over the years of neglect. They insisted they had changed. That they had forgiven me for cutting them off as if it had ever been their place to forgive. But I knew better. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about power and they had lost it. The difference this time, they weren't demanding anything. No guilt trips. No, we're your parents. You owe us. Just desperation. A final attempt to reel me back in now that they had lost everything. I didn't respond. I didn't even read the whole thing. I just left them on read. That's the part they never understood. It was never about punishing them. It was never about revenge. I just don't care anymore. My life has moved on. I have a real family now. People who love me without conditions. Cutting them off was the best decision I ever made. And the best part? They have to live with it. They have to watch from the sidelines while I build a life so good, so fulfilling, that they can never be a part of it. They lost, and I won.